Hey guys, welcome back. I am here with Adam Mills of Adam Makes Beer. You can check out his YouTube channel up here. And we are talking about commercial brewing today. A lot of you submitted questions to us to answer, which is really awesome because that means we don't have to do any work. And we're just going to kind of go through them. I have them somewhat organized by brewing side and business side. I figured the way I organized these was like, from the beginning of brewing to the end of brewing. It's like the cleaning questions are at the bottom, the glycol questions are at the bottom, and then as you go through a brew day. So hopefully it makes some sense. All right. So I guess we can, first of all, what are you drinking?
I am drinking our Munich Helles. We do a handful of lagers at Cartridge where I brew, and this is Up the Hill. This is our Munich Helles. Munich Helles is like one of those beers you always want to, like, in my mind, like as a brewer, if there's a beer that you really want to nail, that would be an awesome style to be able to do. It's just got the tradition. It's light, easy drinking, everything like that. So yeah, that's what I'm drinking. What about you?
I am drinking my Lavender wet hop pale ale that I actually just released on the YouTubes. The review is actually coming out tomorrow. Who knows when we'll put this one out, but shouldn't take long to edit, so hopefully soon. But yeah, it threw me for a loop. It's better than I thought it was going to be. It does not taste like soap, which is kind of what I expected. But
Are you a fan of wet hop beers?
Oh, huge fan. I love them. I don't know what it is either. I think it's like kind of like the IBUs aren't so in your face. I feel like you can get a really like hopped beer, but not the punch you in the face bitterness, which I don't like at all.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I've only made commercially, I've made one. And it was cool. It was something super outside of my range of what I've typically done. And yeah, I think that makes sense because I think a lot of times people will use those wet hops really late in the process. So maybe it's one of those things that helps to bump up, the flavor and aroma aspect of it without leaning so heavily on a super aggressive. I think those beers tend to be a little polarizing. I think people either like them or don't like them a little bit. I'm not sure.
That's so funny because I think the only people that I know who don't like them, and I could be wrong, I could just be misremembering, but I think my neighbors up in Washington don't like wet hopped beers for some reason. And it's like, you guys are literally in Washington. How do you not like wet hopped beers? It's like they're around you. They're
Does
like
Sierra Nevada have one that's put out that's like pretty well circulated for wet hot beer? I mean, like nationally well circulated.
I feel like I remember seeing that, but I haven't gotten my hands on it. Yeah, it's so rare to find a wet hopped beer down here, mainly because I hardly go to bars or anything.
Sure.
I seriously go to one bar, and it's just because my friend works there. But they have a good beer selection, but I don't know if they had any wet hop on. I was kind of out of town for the like wet hop like craze, but I guess they're probably still around.
Yeah, they've got to be rolling out still, I would imagine, because I know I was seeing stuff online with folks out at Harvest and everything like that. So yeah, it's got to be in the coming weeks and everything like that.
Yeah, hopefully. I'll have to keep my eye out.
For sure.
It just occurred to me that we should talk about who you are and like what you do.
For sure. Well, my name is Adam Mills. I've been brewing professionally for the last 10 years. The first 10 years of my career, I taught at-risk students. And so I got out of teaching, got into brewing after several years of home brewing and really being into the like competition and beer judging side of things. And now I am head brewer at Cartridge Brewing in outside of Cincinnati. We make surprisingly, we end up making a lot of lager there. I was expecting kind of a lot of menus like I had seen downtown that were really IPA heavy and different things like that. But we found where we're at in the Kings Mill Mason area. We sell a lot of traditional German lager. You know, the city has that German heritage. The cartridge is inside of an old munitions factory, and so it
Cool.
kind of has that historical feel too. And I think this is kind of the combination of everything. Those old school German beers are they're really food friendly, and we do have a restaurant as well. So yeah, we end up. I didn't think I was going to end up making a ton of traditional German lager there, but I am. I'm loving it. But we're doing a lot of other things too. So yeah, and then I just this year I started making a YouTube channel, Adam Makes Beer, where I'm trying to give like a real deep dive look into all the processes, techniques, recipes, different things, and just kind of gives that kind of pulling back the curtain experience as to what we're doing at least. You know, I can't talk for I can't talk for everybody, but just kind of letting people see what we're doing, and really just trying to show how you know, we're just constantly trying to get better at what we do. So it's not so much like I'm saying, hey, this is how you make IPA and like this is the definitive thing, but more so like this is how I'm making IPA right now because I just read this article and I
Mm-hmm.
want to try this technique, and then it's probably going to be different the next time I do it. So but yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and yeah, that's my deal.
Yeah. I feel like our channels are similar in that fashion, in that we're just here to learn stuff. And though you do it commercially, I feel like, I mean, just with like how popular like brewery tours are, you would like obviously think that like a brewing commercial brewing Instagram, YouTube. Well, I can edit this.
Sure.
A You would imagine that a deep dive in like behind the scenes kind of commercial brewing YouTube would be popular because like that's what I always want to know. It's like, you don't really get to see that. Like you can go to someone's
Sure.
house and watch them homebrew, but it's kind of more difficult to get in the commercial brewing sector. And by the way, lagers are blowing up in LA. There's
Yeah.
like a bunch of lager focused breweries opening up here that are specifically telling people that that's what they are. So
Yeah.
it's gonna be the new trend, and I am so here for it. I am so tired of heavy IPAs and milkshake IPAs. I'm just like, yes, I want a Helles, please. And I always order them, and my husband's like, what is that? I'm like, it's a Helles. It's amazing. I got one from Russian River when I was driving back from Washington, and it
Okay.
was to die
I'm
for.
sure. I'm sure. And that's always so exciting. Like, and it's not to, and it's not to like diminish other styles or whatever, but from a brewing standpoint, it's just it's a challenge, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things to tackle with it. And it is like that with other styles, but it's the fact that a lot of those lager styles they are more subtle, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's not like you can just always be blasting somebody in the face with flavor. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things I'm excited about because I mean, you know full well that it's everything out on your side of the country that comes to my side of the country. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And we kind of made as we were seeing, you know, our Helles was doing well, our Pilsner was doing well. Um, we kind of made a decision to kind of keep rolling with it a little bit, and I did like a rice lager, like a Mexican lager, and that turned into our #1 seller, and then getting out like Munich Dunkel and different things like that, and amber lager and things like we had an amber ale on tap in house, and I'm like, and it's fine, but it's an amber ale, right? And it's like, so well, what if I do, let me go amber lager. And so those folks, because there are people that will come in and they'll say, do you have an amber?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that
Oh
is
yeah,
it's
that's
kind
my
of one of,
mother-in-law. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like I want an amber or a red, and that is all I want.
yeah, yeah. And so that was like when we kind of made the decision, we're like, okay, we're gonna roll this amber ale into amber lager, and then we're gonna try to like start trying to like make the statement that we make lager here, and we have like five to eight on all year. And yeah, so I'm excited for it, and I'm ready for that. So that would be great.
Yeah, I'm stoked. All right. Well, we have a lot of questions to get to, so we should probably do that so this isn't an hour-long video.
Sounds good.
Okay, so for the brewing side, some of these questions are from Instagram, some are from YouTube, and I'm just gonna read out the names of who did it as well as I can. So
Sure.
everyone bear with me. So from Big Pop Brewing, what is the biggest lesson you learned when jumping from home brewer to pro brewer?
Yeah, for me, it was equipment and understanding, how everything works functionally on the pro side. When typically for most of us, and I do know that people have some really interesting like homebrew rigs and some really high level rigs at home. When I was brewing, it was a cooler for a mash tun, a big aluminum stock pot, and stuff like that. And it's all equipment that's not meant for making beer,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I don't know, like that was a big stepping stone. The first time, and it's a throwback thing for me. So like when I was home brewing, I batch sparged. And the first time I ever fly sparged was like a 15-barrel batch of beer, like my first professional brew day.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So there's some of that. And I feel like just understanding kind of the basics of all the equipment, really understanding how to work with pumps, and especially pumps that move like a lot of liquid,
Danger
that's
pumps.
very hot. Yeah, right. Yeah. Dude, I was scared of the pump for a really long time, and it takes a while to get used to it. And I mean, I had never done triclover until I was live in my first spot, and in your mind, you're worried you're gonna pop one of those clamps or something. You're gonna be pumping, 60 gallons a minute of 165-degree caustic all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So the scale of it, I think is intimidating, right? Making 5 gallons of beer for so long, and then the first time I brew on the pro side, I made more beer than I ever made as a home brewer. You know, so I think those are some of the biggest changes for me was definitely on the equipment side. Conceptually, what we're doing is still the same thing. We're turning starch into sugar, right? And we're still using a lot of the same process items in order to get things done. We're using heat, we use pressure, we use pumps, different things like that. But yeah, I mean, a big recommendation for me, just speaking to that, I had the good fortune of getting into Arbor Brewing Company in Ann Arbor, Michigan, with what ended up to be a dear friend of mine, Bill Gerds. And he was brewing there at their pub, and he would let me come in and just shadow, and I would shadow on Thursdays and Fridays. And just getting a chance to see, like, to even get the pulse of a brewery, like see what the ins and outs are, what the day-to-day feels like, and kind of wrap your mind around what's going on equipment wise is, I don't know, kind of one of the biggest things, I think.
Yeah. When I was brewing with Glenn Allen at Pilot Project, the one thing that struck me that I guess I didn't realize the other times I'd been to commercial brews, because I had only really done like group brews before.
Mm-hmm.
The sparge takes forever. It's like I seriously like went, got a hamburger. I walked a mile, got a hamburger, went to another corner shop, got some sodas, walked a mile back, and it was just finished. And I'm like, how? Like, I don't
No,
even
for sure.
understand.
For
Yeah.
sure. And those are two of the very real process variables. Okay, so you're going to be sparging, laddering, just like you would at home, but there's big volume differences, right? And
Mm-hmm.
knockout is different too. And so that can lead you into some functional differences, so like when you and I are knocking out 5 10-gallon batches at home, we can change the temperature of that kettle very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And you're even going to start dumping temperature, I mean, just on its own, really, without you even trying, with a smaller size kettle. But for me, my kettle is 15 barrels, so I put 558. I put 18 barrels in, so 558 gallons. That holds temp, and so for me, Whirlpool editions are going to stay hot for a while,
Yeah.
even before I'm knocking out, with my Whirlpool and then letting that kettle settle. And so some of those process differences just based off volume will impact some of the will have impact, especially on things like bitterness and how to adjust with that. So
Yeah, that is interesting to think about. Like it just takes so much longer. So you do have to really figure out with your recipe, like, oh, well, my hops are going to be a lot more efficient because they're going to be sitting in heat longer.
sure.
So what do I do? I mean, that's the saving grace with what I was doing with pilot projects is like I was like, here's my homebrew recipe. Please take it and make it a beer.
Sure.
And they did a great job.
And those 60-minute additions, that tends to be pretty linear
Mhm.
because once you're boiling a hop for that long, that curve really tapers off. Like you might continue to get a smidge more bitterness out of that 60-minute addition, but that addition is almost pretty much linear. It's those closer to knockout, those closer
Yeah.
to flame out additions. And so when I just start, I mean, there's been a lot of stuff where I've done in my career where it's just like, okay, I think this is going to work like this. What I started doing, so when I started making IPA at the first brewery I was at, like really aggressive whirlpool hopping, like that was more like a West Coast thing, and just starting to happen with beers like Heady Topper and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And so the first IPA I was making there was really just essentially base malt, like a little bit of flaked rye, because I like flaked rye because I think it's less grainy than and earthy than like just regular malted rye, but I do think you get like a nice like little viscosity or body out of it, so it gives a little substance to the beer. And then I had 5 IBU at 60, and then everything else is in the whirlpool, right? So there was nothing else because I really wanted to try to lean on that. I had heard there was people trying that, but then it's like, well, and when I was using Pro Mash at the time, and Pro Mash was telling me that was 0 IBU,
I know, right?
right? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. So what I did was, and I think I'm sure it was some advice that I got from the Brewing Network. I just calculated them as 20-minute additions, and so
interesting.
that kind of
Yeah.
got me in the ballpark. And then like the things like that evolve over time, and like right now with utilizing like drop temperature whirlpools, you kind of figure stuff out just by feel even too. So, but yeah. Anyways, before
Yeah,
I rail too
sometimes
long.
no, this is great. Sometimes brewing is definitely more of an art than a science, to a degree, especially in the craft brewing world, I think. Just kind of got to feel it out and see what happens.
Well, sure, and some of the stuff you can kind of try to lean on the math, like the stuff I was just talking
Hmm.
about. Like if you look at those utilization curves and based on temperature, so you can find some charts out there that'll show like at 212 degrees you'll get this level of extraction out of your hops, right? But then when you go down to 170, you see that you basically get half the amount of bitterness. There's half the
Hmm.
amount of utilization. And so that's how you can start trying to leverage some of these like more modern takes, like with New England style, right? Of dropping that whirlpool temp, essentially doubling up, at least doubling up your hop load going into whirlpool. And even though you're doubling it, you're still only making the same amount of bitterness you would normally be making because you have that drop whirlpool temp,
Yeah.
but you have all those hop compounds, all those oils and resins in there. And so you can really magnify that side of it without blowing up the bitterness side.
Awesome. I think we kind of hit on this already, but Backyard Brews and Barbecues asks, after brewing at a commercial scale, do you have you changed any of the processes when you homebrew? Do you still
Well,
homebrew?
I do not.
I think a lot of commercial brewers kind of give up the home brewing. It's like, okay, here's my take on it. I was an artist. I started working at a gallery. I
Uh-huh.
no longer make artwork. I feel like
Yeah.
it's kind of similar in the brewing world. It's like it goes from a hobby to a job, and then you're like, I don't want to do that when I get home.
Well, I feel like it's one of those things. Now, I would love to have I don't have a pilot system. I would like to have a pilot system. The problem for me with brewing smaller batch, especially if I want to feel as if it's going to be like something that's going to be similar to what I'm doing on a larger scale, the processes are so different. And not, I mean, not completely, because I just got done saying they're so similar, but there are some things that are different, right? You know what I mean? And so like, especially if I'm trialing, like I feel like trialing yeast on small scale is different than trialing yeast on in larger tanks, right? That head pressure with beer can influence ester formation, things like that.
Do
Um,
you find that that beers brewed on commercial system, even with the same yeast, will have less ester formation because of the head pressure?
so that's a good question. I don't have anything other than what I know right now,
Hmm.
right? And so like what I can say is for the last couple years, I've really just been exclusively using like the Augustiner strain, which is like for imperial yeast, it's their harvest strain, which is a lager strain. Super versatile, really easy to use. I'm very familiar with that strain. And then I've been using juice from Imperial, which is basically like London 3, what
Hmm.
everybody's using, what a lot of folks are using for hazy. And I feel like the you know, just running those two strains, I feel like there's all these other variables that I'm trying to dial in and play with that yeah, I don't know. It's tough to tell. I will say I have noticed differences with harvest. Now, this can be either a good thing or a bad thing to you, but like I said, we make a fair amount of lager. And at the time, my assistant brewer Maggie, who's absolutely amazing, she's at a great brewery called Urban Artifact right now, and here in Cincinnati, they do fruited tart beers. Um, it was like one of her first brew days where I was pretty hands off with her. And we had a nice pitch of harvest that was going into this rice lager. We pitch all those beers at like 50 degrees. Um, and we usually run cold with them for a while and then slowly ramp the temp up as attenuation continues to drop. Well, she forgot to hit set on the temperature control for the tank. And so end result is the beer went from 50 free rise to 70. And when we realized it was at 70, I wasn't going to crash it back down again. I was just going to let it finish there. Like I didn't want to cool that yeast down
Hmm.
and maybe tell it it's time to go to sleep or whatever. So we just let it finish at 70. And it is crazy the different profiles you get. Like that's typically a really clean beer, very low ester profile. And like I said, you can take it for what it is. But when we brew that beer that way, free rise to 70 and then hold there and then crash and lager, it's much more of like a Bud Miller Coors
Huh.
aromatic off of it. Like it's a very domestic light lager aromatic off of
That's
it.
so weird. I would
And
not
the
expect
funny,
that because those guys are lagering so low. Well, I
sure.
mean, actually, are they, or are they just fermenting hot but under pressure?
Well, and so yeah, and so there's different variables, right? Because
Yeah.
I do believe that they are doing high gravity ferments, and so they're cutting it with water post ferment back to 4.2 or 4.4, whatever those beers are. But
I
like the
hate that
crazy,
so much. I totally drank a case of Budweiser this weekend and I feel so gross now.
well, it's one of those things though. Every once in a while, like when I do like get my hands on those beers are fascinating to me. Like just from I don't know,
It's nostalgia.
it
It's
is.
total nostalgia. Like Yeah, I was like building some stuff in the backyard. It was 100 degrees. My husband bought us a pack of Budweiser at 4 o'clock. I was like, yeah, it is Budweiser time. Like, absolutely. I got my little Yeti koozie going on,
Yeah,
so it
yeah.
stayed cold for like 5 hours.
Well, and that's the way those beers have to be drank too,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that's the
No,
other
a hot
thing. And like,
Budweiser is awful.
well, and that's when I found out, like going back and drinking those beers, you realize like, so like you know, like seltzer, LaCroix and stuff started like popping off and whatever years back. I remember I started drinking that and I'm like, there so much of the flavor of this is just carbonation.
Hmm.
And then I understood what carbonation tastes like. And then I realized how much of the flavor profile of light lager, like real American light lager, is carbonation.
And
Like
it's
you're,
so carbonated. It's
yeah.
like,
It's wild.
yeah,
It's wild. But it is, it's a huge part of the profile. It
that's
is a
so
huge part of the
interesting.
profile.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, you like kind of take it at its face, like until you start talking about it, and you're like, they're doing a lot of things to like make it that what it is and
well, they're
just like
making
make it
exactly,
palatable.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're making exactly what they want to make.
Oh yeah.
And because it's what people, I mean, obviously it's what the super, and it's easy for us where our heads are so much in this
Hmm.
side of beer, right? It's kind of easy to forget that, listen, like, is it like 70% of the market is still, maybe more,
I think so. Yeah.
are still those beers, you know? And the crazy thing is it doesn't matter where you go in the country, that Bud Light tastes like Bud Light.
Yep.
You know, like from a quality control standpoint, it doesn't matter where you're getting it, where they're brewing it, it always tastes the same. You know, it's a wild thing. Charlie Bamforth, I don't know if you're familiar with Charlie Bamforth. He used to teach at
Maybe.
UC Davis, and I think he's like a special advisor for Sierra Nevada. He's a great listen. He's written a ton of books. He taught brewing science at UC Davis. Great speaker, fun guy to listen to. Great British accent. And he in this very dignified way, he always calls them gently flavored lagers, which I think is such a polite way of saying it. So yeah, those
It's a
gently
very
flavored
British way of
lagers.
saying it.
Absolutely.
Um, so quick anecdote. I'm in like I'm adjacent to Van Nuys in Los Angeles, and there's a huge Budweiser plant here. Like it's
Uh-huh.
massive. And whenever I go to, there's another brewery in Van Nuys, which is my absolute favorite in LA. It's called McLeod, and it's an English style brewery.
Okay.
And their t-shirts say the second largest brewery in Van Nuys.
I like that.
Every
I
time I
like
go in,
that.
I'm like, today's the day I buy that shirt.
Yeah, that's cool. That they have somewhere up here. Like I moved to Cincinnati a couple years ago, and there's somewhere like maybe an hour away from me, like on the other side of the city. There's a big Coors plant or Molson plant or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that stuff. It's crazy. You start to get like, you realize, okay, so like I was brewing at home, and then like, you know, like a 7 to 15 barrel spot seems like, you know, it seems like science fiction, right? Like it
Hmm.
just seems like so technical and everything. And then you go into places that are like regional spots, you know, and you're like, oh wow, like this is it's production on a whole different level. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like the difference between making 5 gallons at home and making 15 barrels uh at cartridge is far closer, I think, than like, I mean, some of the big boys by us, like Rheingeist by us, there's much more connection to what I'm doing now in home brewing than with what Rheingeist is doing. Like just from like a production standpoint, you know, I
Yeah.
remember I went to New Belgium years ago, and we were looking in, and you know, you see all their stuff, and there's no water on the floor, there's no grain dust on the floor, there's no hops on the floor, and their brewers are sitting at computers, you know. And in my spot, you know, I mean,
Yep.
we're sweating like crazy, and you know, everything's wet, and it's still very manual, you know.
Oh yeah. Follow-up question. Did you go down the slide?
I did go down the slide. Someday, if I were ever to have like own my own spot, I would want to be, and I don't know. So I'm assuming you did the tour.
Yeah, my best friend from college actually used to live walking distance from there. Like from her front porch, you could see the brewery. She was
Sure.
like 5 houses
Nice.
down.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, the buy-in, so the person that did our tour, the level of like personal buy-in he had with the company, if I ever have my own spot, I want that's how I want it to be. Like the people that at least at the time, I don't know it's been several years since I've been there, but I mean the people, the feel there was very good with the staff, man.
You know why?
People were excited. Yeah, I think so. Go ahead. What were you
Yeah,
gonna
they all
say?
owned it.
They all own it. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't been since they sold, but yeah, I mean I hope like yeah, everyone there was amazing.
Yeah.
Um and it's like I mean even the guy sweeping the floor like went home with like 600 grand from that sale.
Yeah.
So, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I really love the employee owned model. It's
Sure.
I mean it's just like makes sense.
Well,
Um
and some of the stuff is crazy though, and I haven't been like you. I don't go out a lot myself. And but when we were there, like they don't take tips. And so like the bartenders weren't taking tips, and they would just say, take whatever money you want to tip us and buy a 6-pack when you're at the store or
mhm.
something like that. Um, that's a mind blower too. Like, is that something that's more common out in your part of the country?
Are you kidding
Or
me?
yeah.
No. It's like if you're not tipping 20% out here, you're garbage.
But yeah, but they were like turning tips down and stuff. So I mean, I guess they're clearly paying a living wage at the bar for people that are pouring, right?
Yeah.
And but yeah, that's a cool experience out there.
Yeah, it was amazing. I love it. All right, next question. We have done 2 questions. This is gonna be a
That's my fault.
two-parter. It's gonna
That's
be a
my fault.
two-parter. No, I love it. That's the problem is I like it too much. We're both culpable for this. Um, from the Beer Genie, what is your favorite beer to brew, and what is the easiest for you?
Oh, um, the most fun stuff to brew, for me, the stuff that I like doing the most is stuff where and it's rotating. It's always new processes, new techniques, or a new beer, right? Those are the things. There is something to the there is something just to the comfort of the process as well, like
Mm-hmm.
the ritual of the whole thing. Like I'm not a fan of working on the weekend, but there's times in my brewing career where I've had to brew on a Saturday or a Sunday, and there's something to going in. You're the only person there. It's quiet. It's you and the equipment and the brew house, and then you just do your job, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's something really magical about that, and especially
Yeah.
once you get past that point where you do know the way things sound, the way they're supposed to sound, the way things look, the way things smell, and you just know that space, and then you go in and you just do the thing that you do there. That's awesome. that
Mm-hmm.
that's one of those great things, and those days are they're simple, and they're quiet, and they're just really enjoyable, because it's just you, like, I don't know, mastering and knowing that space, and it's really comfortable. Those are the things. Those things are fun. So like just the regular everyday brew day sometimes is the one that's really great. But the thing that keeps me, the thing that keeps me hungry and moving is new stuff, and finding new levers to turn, or pull, and knobs to turn, and things like that. So
Oh yeah, I'm the exact same. And yeah, I noticed one day I probably hadn't brewed a beer without filming it in like a couple years. And then I was like, oh, I need to remake this beer for like an event or something. And I
Hmm.
was like, I'm not going to film it. I've already filmed it. Obviously, like, don't need to put out the same video twice, right?
Hmm.
And it was the most magical brew day. It was just so calm and
Yeah.
centered and just like, yeah, it's like flow state versus like having to talk to a camera. And like, yeah, I talk to myself anyway, but I think that's
Sure.
from the camera.
Sure.
I think the camera
Sure.
made that happen. I didn't start doing that beforehand. But yeah, there is something so nice and ritualistic about doing something that you know
Yeah.
so well and you've been doing for so long. And it's just like it's you don't even have to think about it. You just do it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like I mean, they talk about flow state being like the best way to learn new things too. So I mean, having those times is when you actually like, oh, this is what would solve this problem, like that
Sure.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then really and it is and so much of it is just and especially on the pro side, like I'm training some newer people into the industry, and you can know the nuts and bolts of how to turn wort and stuff, and then it's just reps. Like I used to get frustrated when I was first getting into everything, and I wanted to be a really good beer judge, and I would listen to Jamil Zainasheff talk about how you need to taste a lot. You
Mm-hmm.
have to like actually develop your palate. This isn't something that you're just going to smash through and then become great, right? And that's really what it is, on with those processes as well. It's like you know the process, and then it just has to become, yeah, it just becomes a second nature thing, right? Yeah, it just
Yeah.
becomes an extension. So yeah.
Yeah. When I was doing my beer reviews with my old neighbor Jenny, she's the bartender at the only bar I ever go to, but she has an amazing palate for wine and beer. And she taught me a ton just by like sitting there talking. We would have our flavor wheel out and we would just drink different beers and talk about them. And we would do it on camera, which was
Yeah.
we probably looked like idiots a lot of the time. But it's a good way to learn. And it's
Sure.
like, oh, you taste this, and we taste completely differently because I'm
Yeah.
tasting from a brewer side and she's tasting from like, say, a sommelier side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was, and people are like, oh, you can pick up things in beer, and it's like it's just practice. That's all it is. It's practice
Uh-huh.
doing it like, and I don't even drink a ton of beer that's not my own except for like the occasional Budweiser and what my work wife brings me.
Sure.
Um and but yeah, I need to actually refine that skill more because I just like don't seek it out, and there's a ton of beer styles I haven't even tried, I'm sure. Um
And I think you hit it though. I think it's a communal thing.
yeah,
Like you
that
know
yeah,
what I
that's the
mean?
thing.
Yeah,
I moved
it
to a
it
house
really
in the
is.
middle of nowhere next to the Budweiser plant.
It's true. And so like I'll have friends that brewer friends that they come up and they'll bring beer. And that's the best. And that's the most beer I'll drink. And we're
Hmm.
pouring smaller pours just because like that's the best to me, is to sit down and taste beer with people that want to really know. And it's not that I'm any authority or they're the authority, but it's like let's sit down and really talk about what we're tasting. and,
Yeah.
and like it's just like, because it's just about getting better. Like a buddy of mine that brews up in Michigan, Brian, from Stormcloud, every time I'd see they have these awesome beer festivals in Michigan that the Brewers Guild puts on. They're really well run, they're huge, and they always take really good care of the brewers with good VIP areas. And Brian would find me and we'd be chatting. I'm like, hey man, how's it going? He's like, good. He goes, listen, I got one beer here that I hate, and I want you to come over and tell me what's wrong with it. And I'm like, that's the guy I want to have beers with. Like, that's,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? Like, I think that's the spirit of it. Like you
Oh
have to
yeah.
say, you have to be able to go to people you trust will be honest with you, and try to get better with it.
The
So
amount
yeah.
of times that Jenny has told me, I love you, but I hate this beer. It's a lot. It's a lot.
My life mission was just to try to get my wife to drink one full pint of my beer, because she's not a beer person at all. And really for her, like any amount of bitterness is just huge for her.
Hmm.
So, beer's going to be a tall order, but yeah, I have some people in my life that will do that for me too.
Yeah, my husband gets all the weird beer. He'll drink it. He just is like, okay, all right. Like, I need to get rid of it. Please just take it. It's like, you drink it or I dump it. One of the two. All right, next question from, please excuse this pronunciation, Bori Kwok. What are some considerations or equipment steps not performed by the home brewer, but which are critical for commercial brewers? That long ass sparge comes to my mind.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing. I mean, some of the portions of the process are elongated. There's some different things that that might not just be process things, but somewhat like equipment wise. Like I never used a grant until I was brewing professionally. So like a grant is just a secondary vessel that holds wort between your mash tun and your pump. And functionally what that does is, so you have mash tun here and then grant and then pump. And so your pump isn't connected directly to the bottom of your mash tun, because if you start pumping too hard, you can compress that grain bed. And so what you're really pumping off of is you're pumping off the grant, the secondary vessel that you're running off into, and you're pumping off that. You can run that grant dry. You don't want to, but you could run the grant dry and you're not going to be putting additional suction or compression on your grain bed. Okay. So there's some little things like that. There's some little
I'd
things
never heard of that
that are
before.
different. Yep. So like you can have a grant. There's just some little equipment things that obviously the pump side of things. When I dry hop, I utilize a pressurizable dry hop vessel. It has a 4-inch port on the bottom, and I have a 4-inch port on top of my fermenter, and I'll put a big 4-inch butterfly valve on that. So that's just, that butterfly valve is just on top of the tank, and then I can attach that dry hop vessel on top. I can put 11 pounds of hops in that, seal it up, and then I can purge it, and then pressurize the vessel and open it and drop those hops in.
That's neat.
So you can reduce oxygen pickup, DO, with your dry hop. It's also going to prevent, and I'm sure many of us have seen those horrifying / funny videos of beer geysers when people are dry hopping and you've got some CO2 in solution in that beer, and it's like putting the Mentos and the Diet Coke or whatever.
It's insane.
And it blows up. And I've been there. I've been on top of a ladder where this was my first spot. This is the first spot I was in. I was working with my buddy
my worst
Bill,
nightmare.
and and we didn't have the thing, we're just opening up the port. And what we used to do is we would put gas through the CIP arm. So when we opened the tank, there would at least be positive pressure of CO2 gas coming out. So we felt a little better about that. And so, but back then, I'm pouring out of a bucket into this port, and I'm kind of slopping or whatever. And I don't know what we did wrong because it was so long ago, but I'm pouring in there, and he's filling up the bucket again, and I'm really smelling the gas coming out of this fermenter. And I'm like, Bill, you have got the gas ripping on this thing, man. I'm like, it's like almost too much for me in my face.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah. And I'm looking in there, and then I look back in, and I feel like it's getting close to the top. And I'm like, well, that's weird. And so I'm dumb, right? And so I pour more hops in.
Oh God.
And I'm like, Bill, it's coming up. And he goes, what? And I'm like, it's coming up. And then, so dude, just 4 inches of beer and foam just start shooting out of the top of this tank. All right. And so he's like, I'm like, give me the dry hop, like, and so like the little cap, like there's any way I'm going to force this cap onto it. All I'm doing is like turning it into like a spray that's going everywhere. it's all down me. And then finally he opens up the CIP valve arm, and so we started dumping some pressure from there. But I was soaked. And like, I mean, it's funny and stuff, but it's dangerous, right? And I mean,
Yeah.
like, there's, and you know, like sometimes I have to remember to not talk about the beer quality issue first. We're supposed to talk about safety first, not beer quality first. But you know, there's a whole range of things that can go wrong there. So that stuff's all happened, you know, that stuff's happened to plenty of us. But like a dry hop vessel like that, I have seen some people on the homebrew side that will use they have like a little rig for it where they'll have like a sight glass, like I would use like a 2-inch
Hmm.
sight glass or something, and they rig that up and they purge it. And so you can do that stuff like that. But as far as big process, kind of the stuff that we mentioned earlier, the fact that your late hop additions are going to be in the kettle longer. Maybe I don't know how much stuff is done with filtration on the homebrew side anymore, because I've been out of that game for a little while, so I'm not sure what's new and popping as far as that goes. But you know, a lot of pros do filter, especially people that do work on the lager side.
Hmm.
But I don't think I don't think it's as much as sometimes people as people think it is. I think a lot of times people assign like a mystique to it,
Yeah.
because that's fun to do too, you know, and sometimes that's fun to want to maintain. But yeah, I mean, just if you're serious about process, and serious about like, you know, being able to do things the same way every time, just making allowances for like trying to get better, you know, like, oh, you learn something new, try to implement. Yeah, I think that's kind of my take on it. But yeah, so there are little equipment things. But
Yeah. I mean, that grant thing I'd never heard of. So I'm learning stuff myself.
sure.
Well, we have almost hit an hour. So I think we should take a break. This will be episode 1 of 3. And we will see you guys back here for 2 of 3 and 3 of 3. And we will be going into more development, consistency issues, and business stuff. So come back for that. Not going to give any guarantees of when it will post.